So, for the gay attitude question time, we've got lots of exciting people, so please welcome to the stage Channel 4's culture editor, Matthew Cain. Is it really exciting? Ernst & Young's managing partner for people in UK and Ireland, and Radio 4's one of the top 100 most powerful women in the country. That's Liz Bingham. All from different sides, it's amazing. Now, a lady who was #1 in the Independent Pink List, I think in 2011. She was a teacher, she's an LGBT schools advisor, she does so much to combat homophobic bullying in schools. She's a real hero to our community. That's Elly. The only person in the panel who's been on an attitude cover is this next person. He's a former soldier, an author. He's got a book out in June. He's on the cover of our 18th birthday issue. That's James Wharton. Next we have someone I like very much. She is an equality activist and editor of Meta magazine. Please welcome Liz. And even more glamour, an amazing actor from Coronation Street, one of the biggest programmes on the TV. He writes in The Guardian, he's a father and a husband, he's a really good advocate for us as well. He's also the Attitude Man of the Year at the Attitude Awards 2012. Please welcome Condou. That's everyone, I think, isn't it? Let's see how we're going to do this. So, let's see if anyone's got any questions. If you want to just ask a question, put your hand up. Oh, straight away. That young man there with the blonde hair, I haven't met before, and doesn't write for Attitude at all. Tom, how are you? Good, thank you. Good question. Controversial. Elly, we start with you. Tom was asking, what do we think the government should do to combat the rising rates of HIV infection in gay people? Did you say gay people specifically? Or just HIV infection generally in the UK? Elly, nice easy one for you.
Thanks, Matt. Anything about schools? No, throw that one at me at the start.
There's a schools angle in there.
Yeah, it is. Everything for me, of course, everything that I do is totally geared around education. And just like everything education, it's just ignorance, that's all it is. And things like HIV are actually really scary words in schools. And what frightens me is, well, I've been to work in certain schools, and what those schools have are these SRE policies and their sex and relationships policies. And what I try and get them to do is recognise same-sex couples and LGBT people on those policies. And it's frightening, some of them, because the only reference to LGBT people some of those schools have are through HIV and AIDS, and I think that is really, really sad. So we've got a lot of work to do, and it's all to do with policy, I think, at this point. So in schools, the fight at the moment is to get into every single school, look at their equal ops policies, and also look at their SRE policies and update them, and that would allow then all the teachers to then educate the young people within the schools. And that needs to start right in primary schools, right from the very beginning, and then where educators will know about it, and that's really what the problem is. Thank you.
Mr. Wharton, what do you think about that?
I think quite simply more needs to be done. Let's not forget the Conservative government actually that literally banned sexual health from being taught in schools with regard to gay men. And we'll never know what the overall effect of that is in terms of figures. Basically, someone there in the 1980s has got one of them because it meant that a generation of gay people went into the world after school without that knowledge to protect themselves, and they exposed themselves to the dangers that is HIV and AIDS. And we'll never know just how many people died.
Agree. Liz?
I think we're going to be running out of new things to say because I violently agree with everything that Elly and James have said. But I think the education piece extends beyond schools. It's an education for society as much as anything. And I think that the risk around HIV, to both James and Elly's points, is that it is seen as being a gay issue, and so not an issue for the populace at large. And I think actually we need to broaden the message that this is something that everybody should be interested in, and it's only by doing that and making it an issue for the country as a whole that we'll actually start to move the dial on this.
Thank you very much. Paris?
Again, it's really hard to add to that because obviously education is very important, but I think also we need to think about funding for LGBT charities, and I think that I'm not entirely sure and charities like that are funded, but I know that LGBT charities do find it hard, as do all charities, but I think especially so. It's good to know that here in Brighton actually the council is really good at funding charities, but I guess that's what I know. There's some really great groups out there doing work, so we just need to kind of make sure that they're supported.
Before I go to Charlie, I was just going to say something. I wrote something in The Guardian very recently, which was a little bit critical of the Tenants Against Trust. Naughty me. And it's interesting, this whole thing that comes up, and of course it's true that HIV affects everybody, anybody, people all over the world. Globally, it's predominantly heterosexual people who have it. But in Europe, certainly in the UK, gay men or bisexual men, men who have sex with men, are at highest risk. And I think it was something that in the 80s happened, was that a lot of some of the HIV groups were criticised for de-gaying AIDS because they feared that maybe, so the argument goes, that if people thought it was just a gay illness or a gay disease, they wouldn't get the money. And I think unfortunately now, it worries me a lot that I hear lots of young people who really adamantly think that they are at no more risk, gay people, and I think it's really important that we get that message out there to young gay men that we are at higher risk. It's just a fact, it's a statistical fact, and we really need to be educated because we don't get that education at school, which is a frigging disgrace. I mean, it's unbelievable that the education system lets us down and lets all kids down with sex education. But yes, I just thought I'd throw that in like a grenade. Charlie?
Yeah, obviously, I mean, excuse me, education is the key. I think it's also worth remembering that HIV is not the disease that it was when we first heard about it. And I think most of us on this panel, probably apart from Paris, are of a certain age. Yeah, James. Sorry, James. And me, of course. HIV was a very different thing in the 80s, and there was very much, silence equals death, and it was something that if you got, you'd probably die from at some point. Now, we know that that isn't the case anymore with combination therapy and antiretroviral drugs. But the problem with that is there is now a complacency with young people, I think, and particularly with young gay men, who, as Matthew says, it does affect gay men in this country more. There seems to be this complacency that people go, well, but it's fine. He dies, and we just take pills, and that's fine. We just get on with life. And that, as anybody with HIV, and I'm sure you happily tell people, it's not the case anymore. It is a very serious disease. Certainly, if AIDS comes after HIV, that's a very big deal still. So, without a doubt, it's about education. It's about knowing that this, yes, while this is something that's manageable, it's by no means anything that anybody wants to get. Trust me on that.
Matthew?
I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your question was about rising rates of HIV diagnoses. And I think there's a slight difference, isn't there, between the rising rates of infection and diagnoses. And I think the second point is almost as serious, that isn't it more difficult to pass it on if you're on antiretrovirals, and obviously you've got more chance of surviving longer if you know that you've got it. And I think that what the government does need to do is encourage more people to actually go and get tested. I mean, we've all made mistakes and been terrified of going to get a test, but I think we need to get the message out there that whether you are positive or negative, it's better to know, and not just better for you, but better for everybody.
Just in case you didn't know that Tom in the front row who asked the question is one of our writers who writes a column every month about living with HIV, so if you want to chat to him, you're very welcome to. He's a lovely, nice young chap. That's a really important point that Matthew made as well, that a lot of the campaigns across the Western world now are about testing, because if you test, it's really important to know your status basically, and if you're positive you need to know as soon as possible, get onto the the medication, and then it's better for you, and also it means you become much less infectious. So it's really important to know people do still die of AIDS. Someone who went to Attitude a few years ago died a couple of years ago purely and simply because he did not know he was HIV positive. He woke up one morning, he couldn't see out one eye, he was rushed to hospital, and they said, you've got HIV and you've also got AIDS, and he died 3 months later. So it's really important, and without preaching to you, because I'm an old fart, but go and get a test. And Dean Street are here today. If you go and see the guys at Dean Street, they're with the porn stars. Strange, but true. Go and see them, and you can have an HIV test, a really quick one today, and there's people here to talk to you. But it's really important. Of course, it's scary, but it's important to know the status. If you're positive, you need to know, and you need to get into medication. Preaching over. Has anyone else got any comments on that from the floor? Good. Frightened you all into submission. Oh, there's one there. Oh, hello, mister. How you doing?
Matthew, how about you?
I'm good, thanks. Nice to see you.
What Charlie had said, people actually get complacent with that because they know the medication is actually there. And what they don't realise, the side effects of those medications is actually quite atrocious at times. They're better now, but years gone by, they're really, really bad. I don't mind saying that I'm HIV positive for the past 7 years. And it's something that I actually face on the gay scene at the moment. The rejection that you get by telling your gay friends you're positive is one of the hardest things that a positive man can actually deal with. And I cried, I have cried. Trying to find a boyfriend and tell him I'm positive, just like, okay, no, let's move away. I don't want to catch it. People need to actually learn that the fact that if I'm positive, I can actually have a healthy sexual relationship with you and don't get you infected. People need to learn the parameters of what being positive is.
Sure, I mean, there's still massive stigma attached to being HIV, and that's another huge problem. It's also part of the reason that people don't get tested. So, again, Matthew said, I think it's really important to know your status because so much can be done. But yes, we certainly need to go somewhere in addressing the stigma that's attached to it.
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem, that it's a massive thing to discuss. But I know lots of people feel that everybody should say they're HIV positive if you're sleeping with somebody, but the reality is that we're not all perfect and we don't always react well to people who are positive, and we need to look at that. So, do we have another question? If not, I've got one. Is anyone? Can I see a little pause? Hello. Hello. Oh, thank you. Is there a microphone? David Dimbleby.
Peering over your glasses.
Oh, it's you! Sorry, I didn't recognise you. Hello, you.
Hi. My question is that TV plays a huge part in our culture nowadays, and I'd love to know from the panel whether they feel there's been a change in LGBT representation on television over the past few years. Have we moved on from Larry Grayson's days? Shut that door.
Let's go to Liz.
Oh, well, perhaps I should start being, I think, potentially probably the oldest on the panel. Yeah, I think there's been a huge change. You know, when I first started work in the 1980s, you know, I was very much living in the world of Larry Grayson and kind of extreme portrayals of, you know, of the perception of what gay was being was like, let alone lesbians. My God, you know, there were like the only out lesbian from memory at the time was Martina Navratilova, and she, you know, one of the most exceptional sportswomen in the world ever, and she was vilified by the press. And then we kind of moved into the world of titillation. And I'm thinking of the Beth Jordache lesbian kiss on Brookside, for those of you who are old enough to remember that. So it was still all about titillation, and it was all of it slightly seedy. And you know, now I think, you know, where we have, you know, roles like the role that Charlie plays, and others on mainstream television, which are, you know, deeply rich characters. And the fact that they are gay is only part of the character that they're playing. It's not the whole part of the character. I think it's been a huge and very positive change, such that I hope that, you know, the generation like my 10-year-old goddaughter, you know, will grow up with those really positive role models in television and film to look at it and to recalibrate what the whole LGBT agenda is all about.
Charlie, do you have any comments?
No, nothing. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was at an event recently, and Michael Cashman was speaking, who's an MEP now, but years ago he was part of EastEnders' first gay couple, Colin and Barry. And he was one of them, and he was talking about when they were first on screen. It was on the cover of all the tabloids, and the Sun, I think, said, "Get this scum off our television." There was a huge public outcry and a big campaign to get EastEnders to drop them as a couple. Obviously, that didn't happen, and we've moved on from that. There's no question that we've come on, of course. And these days, with all types, not just actors on television, but visible men like Matt and all sorts of people, you know, there are all sorts of different types of gays on television now as well. You know, on Coronation Street, you've got the character of Sean, who's quite camp. My character, Marcus, is the opposite of that. You've also got Sophie and Sean, the lesbians, and they're incredibly diverse. I still think there's a long way to go, and in a way, I think I'm very proud of programs like Coronation Street, actually, because I think they are political with a small p, in the fact that they show gay people in, well, I'm not just Coronation Street, but all of the popular continuing serial dramas, as we shall call them. You know, showing that gay people are out there living their lives as everybody else does. One of the recent storylines in Corrie was about me and Sean looking after his son. And I know at the beginning of that storyline there were a lot of people that were saying, this is ridiculous and we don't want to see this on telly, and, you know, gay men, kids, it's all a bit, you know, PC, got mad and all the rest of it. But we just continued along that line, and after a while people just sort of forgot and got on with accepting the fact that it was two men bringing up a kid on the show. And that was that, and that's why I think these things are important, because I think putting it in people's homes every day normalises things, for want of a better word. So yeah, I'm proud of my part in that.
So you spent a long time between London and Manchester. What kind of reaction do you get from the public on the street?
Very rarely anything to do with mine or my character's sexuality, actually. I mean, it's slightly different now because Marcus with a woman, so that's a bit contentious. But no, I've never had any kind of abuse, and I know that certainly Michael Cashman did back in the 80s. They got a huge amount of hatred coming.
Remember the Sun's headline was EastEnders, wasn't it?
EastEnders was another one. Yeah. Lovely stuff.
What are your views on this, Matthew, being a homosexual on the television?
Well, it's interesting actually, because I agree with Charlie that we have further to go than we think. When I started on screen on Channel 4 News about 2.5 years ago, I was surprised that a lot of responses from Twitter trolls and things at first, because I'm not just gay but camp and therefore quite obviously gay, a lot of people were writing, who is this cabaret artist? I can't take him seriously. And
that was me.
And what I realised was that there's actually different levels of homophobia, actually, and much as a lot of people like seeing the Larry Grayson figure, or Gok Wan talking about fashion, or Alan Carr, or Graham Norton, there's still a resistance to an obviously gay man being authoritative and taking them seriously. And I'm the arts editor. I suspect at the moment the arts editor of any news broadcaster would be the only role that could be done by a gay man. I think it would be great if somebody as obviously gay as me was the political editor, or a foreign correspondent or something.
Or sports, because the next debate we'll talk about, imagine.
Yeah, totally. Although sports, you know, the one role you get a black person doing is sports, because we all know that black people are good at sports, in the same way as gay people are good at fashion and Alan Carr stuff. So, anyway, I just think, I think there's still some way to go, because...
Paris, what are your views? Because you've done a little bit of broadcasting, you're doing more of it, and obviously we're in a very different place when it comes to trans people being represented in the media.
I've got to make a confession, Charlie, because I've never actually seen you on Coronation Street.
Let's leave this stage.
He's brilliant.
I'm sorry, forgive me. Because I don't actually have a television, and haven't had a television for about 5 years, because when I first transitioned, I was going through a pretty tough time. I was pretty depressed, and it really got me down that the only time that you would see somebody like me on television is if we were kind of not actually in the scene, but we were just being referred to elsewhere, like, oh, I woke up with a lady boy last night, ha ha ha. And I can pretty much guarantee you that if you go home and you've got any box sets, comedy box sets at home, and you watch them, you know, the whole series, there'll be a joke about someone like me in there. And that's fine, because, you know, there's jokes about everyone, but the thing is, you won't see a person like me, you know, on screen, and there probably won't be a person like me in the editing room or the production company or writing the script or involved in any process. So I think it's very much the dark old days for trans people, and when I became an activist, when I became involved in activism 3 years ago, I kind of focused on the media because I think we have a lot of the legal gains, trans people, but I think that we need to win people's hearts and minds. And you know, you can say, you know, that the media doesn't matter, and like me, you may not watch it, but those people out there, they're watching it, and it's informing the way that they perceive people like us. And I think that's why it's fantastic that we're starting to get these incidental portrayals and, you know, people doing different things. But for me, I want to see a trans news presenter. There's no reason, you know, why somebody couldn't do it. And until then, you know, we don't have that stamp of legitimacy. We've seen it before with racial minorities and sexual minorities, and we need to see it for gender minorities next, I think.
I just want to say at that point, actually, that obviously you don't watch Norris, you won't know, but there is a fantastic trans character who's been there for many years called Hayley, who's a brilliant character, does an awful lot for the trans community.
Oh yeah, she's a friend of the community.
Yes, she absolutely is, but yes, I get your point, it's, you know, very fun future.
Elly, what's your view on this? Being a teacher for a lot of your career, how's that kind of affected your experience in terms of, you know, what kids see, what kids pick up on in the school?
Yeah, but there's two sides to it. It can be exceptionally positive, and then 50% is exceptionally negative, and that is a real problem. But for me, it's the way that it's reported on the TV. That is the problem. It's the use of language and the angles that these TV companies want to take on portraying LGBT people, which I find quite despicable. We know it's crap. We know LGBT people have a really crap time. Do we need to keep reporting on how bad it is? Where's the positive angle? I mean, we had the BBC into my school a few years ago, and we were on the news. And that came on the news, and the way they reported the work that we were doing in schools was, can you believe it? Teachers are now being forced to talk about LGBT people in the classroom, like it was something really negative. Now, that was a few years ago. We had maybe 2 years ago, and the climate had actually changed. So I really do want to highlight that things were very different, and they did very positively at teachers and what teachers thought about it. And they said, well, 9 out of 10 teachers are not trained, so therefore they're not confident in the classroom to be teaching LGBT issues or looking at LGBT history. So that was a massive, massive step forward. And it's slowly, but again, I think it's the use of language. We read in the newspaper all the time, he or she was beaten up because they were gay. No, they weren't beaten up because they were gay. They were beaten up because of homophobia. So you see, for me, it's the use of language. I mean, for instance, you know, there was a documentary. You saw the Gareth Thomas documentary? Anyone see it? 5 minutes at the end was spent on reporting positive things that were happening in the classroom, because diversity role models, Charlie is one of the role models for, was on that programme, but only 5 minutes. The other 55 minutes for how bad it is to be gay, and I just think it's the way we need to get the balance more positive in an LGBT positive direction, and then that will make a massive difference.
Did you find that kids' views were informed by what they were seeing on TV?
Oh yeah, when we had my transsexual summer, when that came, that was brilliant, because I played it to the kids in the classroom, and that was a positive representation, I thought, of trans people. So yes, of course, and there's another one that I use all the time, which is, you see the Stephen K. Amos, Battyman. Absolutely brilliant. I use that a lot, because in our school, homophobia was a problem with our black community within the school, so I use that as a resource. Call Me Coochie has just come out. Anyone seen that film? Just about Ugandan rights and David Kato being killed in Uganda and all the work that's happening over there. And I went to the opening of that, and they sent me the video, so we're going to screen that, because I think it's really important, because this is a human rights issue that we are talking about in the classroom. So I just think it's very important that kids see, yes, we are very lucky in this country, but it's not like that everywhere. So that's a whole lesson there on human rights. So it's very informative.
James, as a soldier, do you feel more represented as a gay man? Because, like Liz was saying, there are lots of kind of, can be effeminate men, and I'm a bit like that myself, so we don't mind a bit of that. But, I've heard kind of guys who are straight acting, I hate that term, but, more masculine or whatever you want to call it. I've heard them say they didn't ever feel represented. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think, to bring it back to the point just about TV and representation, I take Charlie's point where we talk about his character and his previous partner on Coronation Street Shaw's character. That's two different kinds of gay men, like I said, quite gay as well. And I think TV, underrepresentation on TV is a problem. And Paris made a great point about trans underrepresentation. But I want to make a point about lesbian underrepresentation on TV. Now, our national icon, actress, will all be love. And, Celine Dion.
She's not gay, is she?
I don't want to out everybody, but it's great how much she does on TV. It's wonderful that she wears her sexuality on the sleeve, and she's such a great role model. But where are the other big jobs on TV when there's openly gay women happy to take on multiple roles? I think, yes, trans representation is a big problem.
Can I just say, I agree with that, but I don't know if anybody saw the Sue Perkins sitcom that started the other night. I think it got nearly 2 million viewers, and she obviously is a lesbian, and she plays a lesbian in it. And I just think it'd be interesting to see how successful. They've only just had one episode, but it'd be interesting to see how successful that is going forward.
Yeah, I did watch it, and without being overly rude, I thought it was terrible. It was like cheap shots, crap storyline, and the risk is that it fails, and people think it fails because it's about a lesbian character, as opposed to it failing because actually it's just not very good TV. I hope Sue's not here.
Scratch her off the list for next year.
I think one of the things that we haven't actually talked about as well is why this is so important, and actually I think that those lack of role models and representation on television really actually hold people back, in their real lives. And I think that, I've spoken to people before who've been like, maybe I can't be gay because I'm not like John Inman, or maybe I couldn't transition. And actually, I transitioned off the back of Nadia going on Big Brother, and up until then, the only time I'd ever seen trans people was sitting in a hospital bed, waiting for surgery, just looking thoroughly miserable. And they're literally been aliens to me, because I just couldn't connect myself with this. And then I saw Nadia, and it was like, oh my God, I could still have friends, and I could still go to the shops, and actually be a normal person. And I think that's why it's so important that we get this right, because people need that, and we are a media obsessed society. So we need role models, really.
As younger people, do any of you guys got any comments on that? Do you feel represented? This person just there, about halfway back on the edge.
Yes, I'm not too sure how my comments are going to affect what goes over here in the UK, but I'm from the United States, and I'm sort of like what you would call an activist with the LBG and P flag in Orlando, Florida. And my experience has been, from the standpoint of me personally, coming to the UK for the past 3 or 4 years, it has really given me quite a bit of a sharper perspective on the parallel that we face in the United States as opposed to what's going over here in the UK, particularly Europe as a whole. As far as film and TV, as far as image are concerned, and how young people view how they are portrayed in film, the United States is the cornucopia of film and TV relating to how gays are portrayed, all the way back from Milton Berle, cross-dressing, all the way up to now. Last night I went to see a film called Broken City, and the two main characters. Anyway, the two main characters had a conflict involved where one was perceived as being gay, where Crow assumed that his wife was having sex with the guy when actually she was, as we say in the United States, fag hag, which is a term we use for a female who has a close relationship with a gay guy.
So what you're saying, there's more representation in American?
there's a lot of representation in America. From Will and Grace to Queer as Folk to right now Wharton Family and all the shows that are on TV, and they sort of represent to a small degree what being gay is like, but not totally.
So you feel it's just better in the States?
Well, no, I don't feel it's better in the States. I feel it's there's a lot of variety in the States.
You do also have your own national treasure, Ellen DeGeneres.
We have quite a few national treasures. We have Ellen DeGeneres. We also have Billie Jean King, and you mentioned Martina Navratilova at first, which is where she came out after Billie Jean King came out. And you don't have a long history there.
Well, it's interesting that as I've written a play, which was on a few times, and I've been occasionally in talks with TV production companies, and it's so interesting that they all go, we've had Queer as Folk, we don't need anything else. There's a real problem in the media from, I mean, I'm not being nasty or rude, but a lot of the people in TV are really bloody stupid. As everyone across the world, there's lots of stupid people, but I think there's a lot of really small-minded commissioners and people. I've got one of my best friends works on TV, and he just says the commissioners are just not interested. They're just interested in sensationalised stuff. There's probably this man's probably going to be a TV producer who's going to slag me off now. Yes. Oh yes,
trans comedy. Yeah. And that's quite interesting that they want comedy specifically. Do you think there's a process that, like, gay representation went through like Grace and John Inman? It sort of disarms people. We come into the home, actually, are the gay people funny? Then we can write drama about them. Then we can realise they're people. Do you think there might be a similar process that the trans movement has to go through?
Well, the Trans Comedy Awards came about after an event that we organised, because I do some work with Transmedia Action, and I think that we kind of started out at Transmedia Watch, another kind of campaign group that I was involved with. It was very kind of reactive and just responding to things that had been in the media, saying, oh God, that's really crap, isn't it? Can you take that down and not show it again, or edit it, or whatever? And actually, I think the focus now is about being creative and engaging with people and making things and actually showing. And I think that's where the Trans Comedy Award came from. You know, if you don't like something, do it yourself. You know, if you don't like the comedies that are out there, you know, let's get some trans people in to write some and to write the news themselves and tell their own stories. Because ultimately, you know, what channel and what time do we turn on to see a trans person? You know, can anybody answer that question? You know, we're just not on television. It's absolutely ridiculous. We do exist, you know. So I really hope that something does come out of that actually. But yeah, I see what you know. I think there is a process to go through, and I think it's happening. I think there's only so long that people can kind of take the mickey out of marginalised groups before other people say, you know, come on, this is getting a bit tired now, and like actually, yeah, they exist. We know that now. Maybe we should give them the same basic human respect that we do everyone. So.
You know, I understand that. Why does it need to be a comedy? I understand that, but you know, just again as a fan of TV, you know, times are very difficult. Although let's not forget we're possibly going into a triple-dip recession. I put the television on in the evening, and I want to be I don't mean entertained, but I like to watch something that's quite light-hearted. That makes me forget about paying the next bill. Thomas and I, my husband, we watch Modern Family on Netflix. We just watch it because it's nice and we like it. So although I take your point, why should we be writing comedies about these important issues? I personally don't read too much into it because I think people want to watch comedy at the moment just because of the environment we all find ourselves in with the economy. That's why.
Thank you. Right, let's move on. Who's got a question? Oh, actually, let's come to you shortly because you've had one. We'll definitely come back to you. It's a nice man just behind.
Thanks very much. Steve Gilbert. I'm the Member of Parliament for Snorstall and Newquay, and I hope this question hasn't been asked already, Matthew, because I was stuck getting here today trying to find a kennel for the boyfriend. Sorry, boyfriend's dog. Boyfriend's dog. Equal marriage is obviously going through the House of Commons at the moment. I wonder whether the panellists could tell us from their experience within their different areas what difference that's going to make. And I wonder whether, Chair, you could ask the audience whether everybody here has made representations to their MP to support the final stages of the bill too.
Thank you. Stephen Gilbert. who's done a huge amount pushing equal marriage forward. So thank you to Stephen. I think he does deserve a round of applause. He has been a real advocate for marriage. We may not have had it and been in this place without him, so thank you, Stephen. Actually, let's just ask first, hands up who's written to their MP about marriage, just honestly, because it's just interesting to see. Me too. So you naughty people who haven't, slapping your wrists later. No, it's really important. It is really important because I think one of the things with this whole issue is that the Christian right, bless them, were really, really vocal and really, really good at kind of getting people out and, you know, rabble-rousing and writing to their piece. So it is really important. I remember back in the day of Stonewall kind of changing the age of consent, it was all about postcard campaigns and all the rest of it, pre-email. So, yes. So, Elly, what's your thoughts on...
Well, interesting to get the first paper through Parliament and then the Pope resigns on the same week. I thought that was quite an interesting thing that happened. But in schools, it's an absolute no-brainer. We follow the Equality Act 2010. All of those 9 oppressed groups on the Equality Act are treated equally and fairly. Of course, we have equal marriage. There is absolutely nothing else I can say about it. We have it for everybody, and we have civil partnerships for everybody. When I talk to kids about it in school, they're like, well, why have we got it already? It's as simple as that. Marriage is for everybody. That's all I would like to contribute to that.
Yes.
I'm going to go there. The biggest and most loudest problem to equal marriage was that father of Ryan Scotland, okay? And he wasn't just, arguing against equal marriage. He was being hateful with his words. He was being homophobic, simply. And look what's happened now. He's resigned because 4 male priests have made allegations against him and he's been inappropriate.
5 now.
5.
18 years.
And what I say this is bigotry exposed and unraveled. This is why people are bigoted. In the army, in 10 years, I've had a few incidents of homophobia, and on every occasion I can honestly say that I've seriously questioned the sexuality of the person who's put me in that position. The biggest enemy to everybody is ignorance, I'm glad that Carl O'Brien's been exposed as what he is, and I would be jealous.
Liz, equal marriage.
Oh dear. From an equality perspective, of course, it's a complete no-brainer, and I think it's pretty shocking that we had to go at this on a number of levels and over an extended period. I think what worries me, to be honest, is that I'm still not sure about the equality of it. Is there still opt-outs? That's a problem. We are deluding ourselves if we genuinely think that this is equal. And until we stop the opt-outs, it's not going to be genuinely equal. And yes, thank you to Stephen and to others of the parliamentarians who've actually pushed hard on this. But really, you haven't cracked the really hard nuts in this. And until you do, we won't be equal.
Equal marriage. Are you going to run down the aisle?
Well, I have to say, the details, the difference, I think the question was about the differences between marriage and civil partnership. I'm not an expert on that, actually, probably because I'm single and therefore I'm not in a position to get married or civil partnered. But I think it's interesting that we were always told when we got civil partnerships that it was a matter of semantics and civil partnerships was the gay word for marriage, but it was the same thing. Actually, I'm not sure it is actually, and there is that thing of thinking it's a second-class, watered-down version of full marriage, that we're not quite good enough for full marriage. And I'm not an expert again on the opt-outs, but I think the only reason to not call it marriage for us would be if it was solely a religious thing, but lots of straight people get married in registry offices with nothing to do with religion. So I don't see how there can be any opposition to calling it marriage for us as well. Sorry, I'm not quite sure what I was saying there, but...
Yeah, we can.
Sure,
I agree with what you're saying.
Are you going to civil partnership?
No, not yet. I'm not, and we will get married at some point. We wanted to wait until it was equal. And we're not quite there yet. We're not quite there yet, as Liz was saying. I remember when the Cardinal resigned, I put something on Twitter saying, I actually don't know what the fuss is about. He only fiddled around with a couple of blokes. It's not like he tried to marry them. And I think it's actually a really good point. The fact is, to my mind, it's, as everyone said, it's a very basic civil right and a human right. It's equality. If we are indeed all equal, then we should all be able to get married as equals, like people do. You know, in the same way that Rosa Parks wasn't happy sitting at the back of the bus. She was allowed on the bus, but she had to sit at the back. Well, why? She said, no, I don't want to sit at the back. I want to sit at the front. Well, we want to sit at the front of the church. And I think that's the point. We should be allowed to be equal. So I think it's incredible the work you've been doing, and I thank you and applaud you for it. Thank you very much. But I agree that we're not quite there yet because of the opt-outs. And it's just that little thing, isn't it? In the same way that I was really pissed off when we were given civil partnerships. And I remember having arguments with my friends who were saying, but this is amazing. Look at what we're allowed to do. And I was like, but what are we allowed to do? And they were saying, well, it's essentially the same thing. And I said, well, then why isn't it called the same thing? Why is it called a civil partnership? Why isn't it called marriage? Because it's not the same thing. That's the point. It's people going, well, all right, we'll let them get married. We won't call it marriage, obviously. We'll just call it civil partnerships, and that's lovely. And I agree, everybody should be able to be married. Everybody should be able to be civilly partnered if they want. Straight people should be as well. That's what equality is. So, that's what I think.
The idea of getting married to me is anathema, so I wasn't actually that bothered about this whole gay marriage thing until I saw that it was waking up all these kind of claret-drinking Tories that had fallen asleep in the House of Lords and just sort of frothy at the mouth, and I thought, you know, I think it's actually a really good thing if it upsets them. And, you know, it just goes without saying, doesn't it, really? Of course we need marriage equality. And, you know, I really, really resent being told what we can and can't do with this state. If two people, you know, want to join themselves together, then, you know, why not? What is the issue, really? And I think that, you know, again, to bring it back to the trans thing, trans people have been allowed to marry since 2004 with the passing of the Gender Recognition Act. And so, for example, I was born male, so I could, because I don't have a Gender Recognition Act, which you don't really need, you only need it for certain legal gains, like getting married. So technically, I could actually go marry a woman today, but I couldn't go marry a man. But if I applied for the Gender Recognition Act, which I am legally entitled to, then when that came through, I could go marry a man. And people that have been married and then transitioned, if they wanted to get a Gender Recognition Act and have their gender legally recognised, they would have to become divorced and then get into a civil partnership again. So, you know, when it kind of gets to that level, it's kind of like, this is ridiculous, you know, it's just a different name for a formal relationship. It's just absurd. People telling you, you can do this, you can't do that based on what you've got between your legs. I don't think so.
And in a way, it's what we were saying before about the trans community being underrepresented, because there's been so much talked about equal marriage over the last couple of months with this coming up. It's had huge implications for the trans community because of what Paris was just saying, yet we didn't hear about that really once again. So that's, I mean, sort of back to what you were saying before.
So I hope you forgive me for keep bringing up the trans.
No, but that's cool.
Out of interest, who here, just raise your hand, would like to be married in a religious institution, people of faith? So there's quite a significant amount of people, so it's what we need to do next. Exciting. Has anyone else got a question? That young man at the back with the little, you. You! Speak!
I just wanted to move the conversation to the field of employment. Do you think that in this day and age, being LGBT can affect what career you choose and how you progress in that career?
Great question, thank you. Liz?
Okay, I think it probably could affect the careers people choose because I think there would be a perception that certain careers are more accepting of LGBT. And I think, therefore, employers need to do an awful lot more than we currently do around this agenda to broaden the appeal of different careers and different organisations to the LGBT community. And one of the things that we do at EY as part of our overall diversity strategy is to really push on the LGBT agenda, which is why we're really delighted to be sponsors here today, is to say, actually, we don't care. What we want are bright, hard-working, engaged individuals from any background, any sexual orientation, any ethnicity. We just want you, we want a diverse community to serve our diverse clients. And it's as simple as that. We do need to do more to make us look more appealing as an LGBT employer. So I think there's a lot to do to break down perceptions, so to kind of stop the stereotyping that some individuals might think that they can only be successful in a particular environment.
James, you came out in the army. A lot of people might not accept that to be easy. How was it for you?
Well, I had a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. It was severely easy. It wasn't a huge thing at the time because I was just so happy I finally got to a point in my life where I was ready to tell people I was gay. Throughout my teenage years, that wasn't possible growing up in rural Wales. I was very lucky that my friends in the army really stood close to me and supported me throughout the entire process. I was very lucky in that case. And I think, looking around the job fair today, we've got some wonderful representation from the military coming along and showing that, the Army and the Navy and the Royal Air Force are very good, options for people, particularly students, to consider when going into the Air Force. So, a great idea. I've always been admired by Liz at Ernst & Young being in such a senior role and being authentic and wearing sexuality on the sleeve. And I think that's what is the mark of a good employer. How high up in those senior departments of organisations are openly gay, lesbian and trans people represented. And quite frankly, most places don't get it right. You look at the Stonewall Index on gay-friendly employers and you find people like Ernst & Young at the top, Cooperative, and people like that. And those are the organisations that other organisations, including the military, need to look up to and aspire to.
How did your colleagues in the soldiers and also the bosses react when you came out?
I think I can talk a lot easier about it now I'm no longer in the military. And, I had a good experience, generally speaking. I think I felt the remnants of the generation of soldiers who served when it was illegal to be gay, which let's not forget was only 13 years ago, that existed. So some of the older soldiers who were, approaching 40 and at the end of their career in the military, it was quite a taboo thing for them. It was a new thing. But for the boys and girls I served with on the shop floor, who've grown up in the same generation that I have, I watched through this world growing up, and being gay for me and my friends wasn't too much of an odd thing. They were quite happy to just accept who I was. But like I said, there was still the remnants of the army that didn't allow gay people to serve, which was still recent.
Elly, it seems to me that quite a lot of teachers are nervous about coming out at school. How have you found it, and what's your experience with other teachers in different positions?
Oh gosh, you've got to create the environment, haven't you, where it's absolutely safe for you to come out within a school. And one person can't do that on your own. Yes, one person can lead the initiative, but you need the support of everyone else in your school. You can't just start talking about lesbians in a year 10 lesson. You're just going to get laughed out of the room. And it does get, I've tried to do that in the past, and I've learned by my mistakes, because it's got very aggressive. Chairs start being thrown around the place. It's very edgy. You've got to start this work at a very young age. So right at the beginning of primary school, or if you're in a secondary school, start with year 7s and start doing some LGBT work within the classroom. Because we were talking about where we go in different subject areas. So I think when you're going into the workplace, there are underrepresented subjects, which is what we've been trying to do at Schools Out and LGBT History Month. Because the last 3 years we did sport for 2 years, and we've just done STEM this year. So STEM is science. Anyone else know the other answers? A bit of audience participation, because I'm getting a bit bored. Technology, well done, James Wharton. E must be what? Economics. Oh no, not economics. Yes, well done, lovely. And M must be marvellous. Maths. So it's about what we do we use this fantastic word called usualising. Can we all say it together, please? Usualise, marvellous. So what we like to do is usualise LGBT people from all subject areas within the classroom. And I've just spotted Mr. Nigel Todd there. Now, what he did, he wrote he's a maths teacher, and he wrote this fantastic maths lesson. Kids need to know about area. They need to know how to measure area. So what did he do? Well, he did a lesson, but he used the shapes of the tents at Brighton Pride as the stimulus for that lesson. So you are usualising LGBT people in sport. That's quite a difficult area. Do you think sport is homophobic? Might be, one might say. We've just done a gig on Thursday night, which is why I'm a little bit tired, at the Arsenal. Unbelievable. The Arsenal are going LGBT friendly, you'll be really pleased to know. So this is promotion for them, and this is encouragement for them to encourage sports people to come out and to create that environment that is safer to come out. And this is only going to happen if we're doing this in schools in every subject area to make it safe. Because obviously I'm a music teacher. It's the arts, for goodness sake. It's fine and safe. But we've got to do that with every subject. So sport and STEM are the areas that we're focusing on right now.
Harris, what's your experience?
Well, I kind of live, work, breathe, socialise in a bit of a queer ghetto. But it's interesting what Liz was saying, because I think my impression actually is that people don't care. They want to know if you can do the bloody job. They're not interested in if you're going down Candy Bar or GAY after work, unless they want to come with you. But I think that it's kind of short-sighted, really, if companies aren't taking this on, because I think when you have a mixture of people, I think as human beings, we're drawn to people who are like us, because we feel safe. It's okay, you come over here, and we come over here, we'll all stick together and we'll be all right. And I get that, but that's not necessarily the best thing if you're working as a group. And I think that you've got greater shared knowledge, you've got greater productivity and creativity, and you've got people from a range of different backgrounds. So I think savvy employers probably do recognise that and try to encourage that. And I think anybody who doesn't, and any school that isn't teaching kids that this is a reality, are really missing the trick. It's like, you might not agree with this, but your kids are going to grow up and they're going to apply for jobs, and they may be working with people who are Muslim or who are gay or who are in a wheelchair or something. And if they're not okay with that, they're in trouble. So, I think, we really do need to see a shift in people's perceptions.
It reminds me, actually, when I was a student, I was working at cinema in Sutton in South London, UCI cinemas, because I remember we had a trans man who came to work there, and we had a regular monthly staff meeting and said, this guy's coming, and we must be respectful to him, and treat him with respect and decency, and it was great. It was lost contact with him, but it was really serious. Charlie, is it difficult being an openly gay man
in my business?
In the acting profession?
They're all fucking gay in my business. Apart obviously from people like John Travolta and Kevin Spacey. Clearly very sweet. I don't know. I think the question's been answered really. I think we've come a long way, and certainly as James was saying, I was really interested to hear what you were saying actually about the army. It's such a traditionally heterosexual environment, so I was really interested to hear what you said about that. But the Stonewall Index is a perfect example of companies that really excel in this area. So I would say to all you guys out there looking for jobs, and if you're interested in that, go and look at that and work out the employers that are going to, take you under their wing.
Actually, joking aside, because obviously there are a lot of gay people in the theatre and TV, we just interviewed James Franco for the new issue of Attitude out on Wednesday on iPad right now. And he says he knows some gay people in Hollywood that aren't out. There is a decision, isn't there, for actors? Was that an issue for you at all?
Absolutely, and I had a conversation with an actor that unfortunately shall remain nameless. Who's in the closet, and doing very well. Is he handsome? Is he single? Yeah, handsome, not single, but with a boyfriend for many years.
Hate me even more.
But Housewife's Choice, doing very well, lots of movies, and I had that conversation with him, and he said, well, it's going to affect my career, and all those kind of,
I'm just going through the list of everyone.
I'm not telling you. And that's a real shame because I wish I could, but you know, it's not my life, unfortunately. And I'm out, I'm just happily out. And to my mind, it's, you know, the important thing is being true to yourself. And if your career is going to suffer from that, well, what are your priorities? But some people think that it will affect their career, and I don't know. Maybe it will. Maybe he won't be getting big roles in Hollywood films. But I think, you know, there always has to be the first person, the one that comes out first, and makes that stand first. It's, you know, my opinion is yes, they should.
Matthew, sorry, perhaps.
I was just going to say, they come out and they go back in again, don't they, sometimes?
Well, yeah,
I think, you know, you mentioned Tom Hardy, and I think well, he said it in an interview, and I was kind of backed off it. I know David Bowie did it, Sinead O'Connor's done it recently, and I think that's even more depressing than people not coming out, really.
Well, Luke Evans, who was in The Musketeers, was very openly gay years ago, and you know.
And now he's engaged.
And now he's engaged to his PR, apparently. That's interesting.
Friends, oh God, actually about Luke Evans, don't tweet it. I'm sure he's
No,
straight.
not sure. He's very nice.
Yeah, he's lovely. He's lovely. Good for him. Matthew, you kind of touched upon that a little bit about being, you know.
Yeah, it was interesting, the question actually. You talked about somebody's choice of career, how to affect your choice of career, and I think, certainly for me, when I was thinking about my career many moons ago, right at the top of the list, particularly if you've come from a school environment which wasn't very warm and welcoming to you as again on our lesbian or trans, then it's really important as far as an environment that's going to welcome you, and it was very, very important to me. And it's interesting that when we've been talking about it, somebody said companies should do more to attract people, which is true, because as Paris said, having a diverse team that you work with is very important. We've all worked with teams where it's just all white posh birds and it's surrounded, so all gays isn't a great environment to work. You know, diversity is brilliant.
No, it's not. My boss will know.
But I think it's not so much about attracting people, it's about creating the environment, actually, as we said on the other side of the panel. And, you know, we all admire those pioneers and the people who are the first, whether it's the first actor to come out or the first person to go into any homophobic working environment. But it's quite hard to do that as an individual. It can be quite lonely and it can be quite tough. And I think sometimes, more pressure should be put on employers to actually do things, not just to make it, do a bit of positive PR to attract people, but to take active steps to create an environment that is genuinely more welcoming and nice to work with people like us.
Actually, I spoke to a teacher recently, and he was saying that he was out at his school at a really difficult time from some of the staff, from their head teacher, and he said there were other gay self-managers there, but they didn't come out because I think part of coming out sometimes is still a political act, unfortunately, because then you become you're the gay person. He was the one that had to take all the gay issues, and they just said they couldn't do it.
It's very difficult, but there has to be. I mean, I don't know if any of you are sticking around for the next debate on sport. We should ask John Amici, who's the first, I believe, the first openly gay basketball player in the NBA. Right? It would be interesting to hear what he has to say about this very thing, about making a stand, and also James as well in the army. Obviously, he wasn't the first openly gay soldier, but he's certainly the most high profile. And it would be interesting to find out what they have to say about actually making that step, going, this is me and I'm going to do it publicly, not just for my own sake, but for other people's sake. Because that's what we need. We need role models like that.
Next question. Lady over there with the red top. Yes, you. There's the mic.
During the earlier talk about representation in the media, I think one thing that wasn't actually mentioned out loud was the misrepresentation and underrepresentation of bisexual people. How do you think we can address this, not just in the media, but in the LGBT community as a whole?
Sorry, could you just repeat that last one?
How do you think we can address this underrepresentation in the media and also maybe the cohesion between the LGBT community in our community?
Paris, what do you think?
Well, I'm kind of bi. Well, you know, if I find somebody attractive. But yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, really? Because I don't think people, and it's really, really tricky because I think that people tend to assume that if you're bisexual and you're in a relationship with a man and you're a man, that you're gay, and if you are, you know, with a woman, then you're straight. And it's really difficult. I'd be interested to know, you know, what kind of feedback you get on the people who buy Attitude, but I know that both Diva and Gay Times, you know, try to appeal to bi readers, but it's generally, on the whole, you know, lesbian women and gay men who buy these magazines. So I think it's a bit of a watery identity. So I think maybe that's why people don't always mention it. So I don't know what you do about that really. But in terms of cohesion, I don't know really. I think it is a problem. I think it's very depressing when there is kind of minority prejudice and erasure within the LGBT community, and it certainly happens. I felt really outside my comfort zone in Revenge last night, you know, as a trans woman, because, you know, I've had a lot of transphobia on the gay scene before, so I don't know what the answer is really, I'm afraid.
Charlie?
No, I don't know what the answer is either, and it's interesting that I find the majority of biphobia that I've encountered, I'm not bisexual, but I've witnessed it, I should say, is from the gay community. My character in Coronation Street is a gay man who is now with a woman, and I should clarify that he still identifies as gay. He doesn't class himself as bisexual. They wanted to look at what happened when a gay man fell in love with a woman, and to play that story out. And the response that I've had from the public has been overwhelmingly positive, apart from the gay community, who have been up in arms. Now, in some respects, I can see why that is. My character is in a lot of ways, very positive gay role model. He's not camp, which a lot of gay people tend to have a problem with, because they find, like we were talking about before, a lot of gay people, I think it's possibly internalised homophobia, and they mask that by saying that these people are stereotypes. That's not true, as we know. People like that exist. People like Sean on Coronation Street exist. But anyway, I digress. So a lot of the gay community have kind of said, but this is outrageous. I can't believe that they've made the one positive role model we have, gay role model, they've made him, you know, straight. That's not what they've done at all. But also I would say that gay people, the gay community are the last people really that should judge others on who they sleep with. I think we should all be a lot further down. We should all be more aware than that. And actually, bisexual people get an awful lot of stick for not being able to make up their mind, or as Paris was saying, if they're men not coming out, you know, all that kind of nonsense. It seems like you know, it's acceptable to sleep with a woman, but not with a man if you're a man, all that crap. And I think actually the acceptance, I'm sorry to say, needs to start with the gay community. That's where I've witnessed the most.
Elly?
I just wanted you all to be rest assured that we are giving all the facts in schools. So our young people are educated about different types of sexuality and sexual orientation. And really, bisexual comes across as it's a kind of new cool, I have to be honest. Because, you know, we've got like Katy Perry, Rihanna, identifying as bisexual, Frank Ocean's about being bisexual, and using those as role models in schools. The kids really are really attracted towards that, you know, because their music is a powerful source, as we know. I always talk to kids about what the definitions are, go straight in with the facts. So L is for lesbian, what is a lesbian, and then we'll get to bisexual. And what do the kids say when you say bisexual? Give me a definition of a bisexual person. What do you think they say? Greedy, yeah. They just want everything, yeah, have their cake and eat it, yes, every holds a goal, all this sort of stuff, yes. I get all this shouted at me in classrooms. And really, we need to be extending on that point, you know, we've got other words now. We've got people that fancy men, women and trans people, so we're bringing the word pansexual into the classroom. And believe it or not, we don't even have to fancy anyone if we don't want to. So we can be asexual if we want. So it's about using these terms and definitions and, you know, allowing young people the space to talk about these things and be whoever they want to be. And then hopefully in my utopia before I die, we will stop having to identify as anything. We can just bloody well be who we want to be without any fear of discrimination whatsoever.
Liz.
Well, I equally don't know what the answer is. I don't have the silver bullet, but I would say that we're on a journey, and I think where identities are less ambiguous, like the L and G of LGBT, then it's kind of been their journey, their voice, or I should say our voice, to start off with, because it's kind of easier to understand because it is less ambiguous. We've talked a lot in answering and dealing with many of the questions already about role models, and I think perhaps part of the solution is in finding the right sort of role models in the B and T communities that will really help to drive the agenda forward. And I do echo what everybody on the panel has said about us as a community really needing to drive this and to be much more inclusive ourselves and to be much more demanding of organisations such as Stonewall to recognise the B and the T of LGBT.
Thank you very much. Listen, we're going to have to wrap up very shortly. We've got another really exciting debate. I just want to ask one question from myself, which is a vaguely quick answer. Should we out people, positive people who are acting against LGBT equality? Elly, what's your thoughts on that?
Should we out anybody?
Should we out people who are in the closet, who are acting against our best interests?
No.
Like Keith O'Brien. Like him.
We shouldn't.
Like him being a kind of, good example of...
I don't think we should out anybody. Everyone has it's their personal choice to outside if you want to. Never, never, never. I've seen disastrous consequences of people being outed. I think it's totally unfair. It's our personal decision to be who we want to be, whenever we want to be that person, and it could change as well. And that's okay too, because your sexual orientation is completely fluid. What we have to do, we've got to see the bigger picture. The bigger picture is getting training. This is training for schools, training for teachers, training for workplaces on all equality issues, so we all understand the issues and the histories fully. That is so much more important. And in turn, that will create the ethos and the environment where it's safe for everyone to be who they want to be. That is the bigger picture. That's what we need to be focusing on, not outing people. It's not the way forward. It's very dangerous.
James, what are you thinking?
I don't think, in the 21st century, we shouldn't be outing people, regardless of Cardinal O'Brien, who was a horrible man, but I would never out him, and people like him as well, and there are many people like him. Outing people is not the answer. Let's not forget, I know I keep saying that, but there are newspapers that used to have very overt policies about outing public figures, and the knock-on effects of that is tragic, and often, and I know all too well, and I know Elly does, these terrible things can lead to suicide, awful other things.
There's talk of kind of, I think, Peter Snatch was saying there were quite a few, it was Ian Dale, was there, the Conservative gay publisher, who was saying there's quite a few MPs who are married but having gay affairs with people, and he was touching on that issue. Are they being hypocritical, and do they deserve to be outed? And a lot of people, certainly also on Pink News, were agreeing with that. So it's interesting.
I thought it was dangerous, and I think it is a dangerous thing to do, to start talking about outing people in public offices. I think it's dangerous. I agree.
Liz?
I agree per se, but I think there's the one thing in any walk of life that should be outed is hypocrisy. If you're espousing family values and shagging the intern, out it. That deserves to be outed. Hypocrisy deserves to be outed. But not sexual orientation per se.
Yeah, very quickly. We did talk a little bit about coming out earlier. I actually really reject this idea of coming out, because it's this kind of compulsory heterosexuality, isn't it? Where you kind of have to tell people I'm gay or I'm trans or whatever. And it's a load of nonsense, really. We shouldn't make assumptions about what turns people on or who they fall in love with, really. But that said, I completely agree with Liz. I think hypocrisy definitely has to be outed, and I definitely think that we should be focusing on different ways and being positive and not using dirty tricks. I don't like that. But I'm sorry, maybe outing people can lead to suicide, but there are people killing themselves already because they feel so bad about who they are, and people being killed and beaten up, you know, because of homophobia and transphobia. So I'm sorry, if you are adding to that, then you need to be outed, really. So, yeah.
It's a really controversial thing, isn't it? Because you've got Cardinal Keith O'Brien, who's one of the most vehement kind of, you know, people against equal marriage. He said that it was morally disordered, spiritually disordered, bad for you physically, all these kind of things. And yet now there are these allegations, and I think from what I've said, there's more to come out. So it does divide people. What do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better than Liz, really. I think outing people is absolutely wrong. My sexuality is to do with me, whoever I'm sleeping with, and whoever I choose to share it with. And I would say the same for anybody's sexuality. It's absolutely their business. But hypocrisy has no place in this world, in this society, and actually exposed.
Well, yeah, I mean, I completely agree, although I'm a bit more strong about, you know, I don't think you should out anybody at all, because even though we can be impatient and frustrating with people in those positions of power, you can never really know their reasons. I remember when David Law was the Lib Dem MP, was in the expenses scandal, and he said he pretended his boyfriend was his lodger because he couldn't tell his mum and dad that he was gay, and I thought, come on, 45, you're supposed to be running the country, so we've all done it. How are we supposed to respect you to run the country if you can't man up enough to come out and vote? But, having said that, you know, I couldn't possibly appreciate all of his reasons, but what I will say is I completely agree with Paris, and I think I don't see why anybody would shirk from saying if somebody is in the closet and attacking us as a community, I have absolutely no problem with outing them, and I would actually be banged up for dragging them out myself. What's the problem?
Well, thank you very much. There's crowds of people gathering like kind of hawks, so it means that maybe Ben Cohen might be about to take the stage very soon. Got a very exciting debate coming up with some amazing people like Brenda So, Ben Cohen, John Amici, hosted by Evan Davis from BBC Dragon's Den. Amazing. I just want to say thank you to you guys for being here. Thank you to everyone on the panel. Please give them a big hand. Elly, James Wharton, Liz Bingham, Charlotte Condou, and Matthew Todd. Thank you very much. Matthew Todd. Buy a subscription to Attitude, and I love you forever.